So, today my oral will focus on the theme of language. Flora Lewis, an American journalist of the 20th century, said one day learning another language is not only learning different words for the same things, but learning another way to think about things. The 21st century is marked by the development of a multicultural and multilingual society. Constantly evolving languages are an essential tool for maintaining diversity. It is therefore through the analysis of the different uses of language that I will explain what makes it a powerful tool. So, in order to introduce my point, I will begin by explaining that language is above all a way to communicate. Then I will focus on the fact that in addition to being an essential tool for communication, language is a way to exist. And last but not least, I will finish my explanation by saying that language is a way to overcome obstacles. To begin, language is a way to communicate. The first use of language is to allow people of different nationalities to understand each other. Indeed, it is difficult or impossible to understand each other if one does not speak the language of the other. In general, when you have to immerse yourself in another culture, it's hard to understand all the traditions and the codes, but it is even more so when you don't even understand what people want to say. Sometimes it seems obvious for the native, but not for the outsider. Even if language does not bridge cultural gaps between populations, it does limit misunderstanding between citizens of the world. So, to go further, I have decided to rely on the example of Sofia Coppola's film called Lost in Translation. The movie theme is the meeting or in a Tokyo hotel of two Americans lost in a culture that is totally foreign to them as well as in their own lives. This misunderstanding forges a special bond between the two characters. Through their experiences, the film offers a reflection on isolation, queerness, Japanese culture, and language. Language has an important role in this movie because it demonstrates that culture also and above all depends on language. It is for these reasons that it is impossible to understand the way of life of a Japanese if one is not from the country and does not speak the language. Here it is the case of Bill Murray, who plays the lead character and who, no matter what he does, needs a translator to capture what the Japanese director expects from him. He got a part on a Japanese movie, but the thing is that he doesn't speak Japanese. That's why he's lost in translation because he doesn't communicate with the director but only with the translator. The discussion is complicated between the actor and the director. Indeed, one does not understand what is being said because of a translator who does not translate everything, and the other gets angry that his orders are not executed. We can therefore see through this film that language is essential to communication. And now I will continue on my second argument to show that language is a very useful tool because it's a way to exist. In addition to being useful in understanding the other, language has deeper qualities. By deeper qualities, I mean language is a reflection of an identity. It's part of the things that define us. In the definition of identity, I mostly refer to a community or a social class. Language is very important because the language that we use comes from a culture and more specifically from education. As examples, I've chosen two different documents. One talks about the language into a racial community, and the other is about the means of language into a social class in the British society. I'm very interested in the preservation of traditional Amerindian languages. That's why I've chosen to present an extract of a radio emission about the preservation of Kituwa language. This emission comes from Radioactive and was broadcast in September 2021. It's very recent. In this program, the presenter receives two guesses. his sister, who tries to learn the Cherokee language, an Amerindian language, and her teacher, Tom Belt. Tom Belt explains how it is important to save this indigenous language because if it disappears, it's a part of humanity who disappears. By teaching the Cherokee language, they are trying to save their community. The language is what made the history and the experience of humanity. And so he says that if we negate that, we're negating a part of our own, of who we are. The creation of language holiday camps as well as books to learn the regional language is a way to preserve the identity of a people. As a second example, I've decided to take an interest in an article from the Economist Journal and published in 2013. This article, entitled Argot Bargy, is talking about the disappearance of the Cockney language in London. Cockney refers to working class Londoners living in the east of the city. This term also refers to their very slang language. To summarize, the article explains that Cockney has been kind of replaced by a dialect spoken by Caribbean and South Asian communities. Today, the multicultural London English evolves to the detriment of the London Cockney, which is absorbed by this linguistic modernity. The Cockney is considered as old fashioned. Indeed, it is spoken by former worker. Cockney is becoming increasingly rare in the British society and more specifically in London. So it is a whole generation that disappear as well as the legacy of the social environment. Now I will conclude with my last argument that explains how the language permits to overcome obstacles. Language is an art of speaking and convincing. Mastering this art makes it possible to stand out from others and overcome delicate situations. When we think of the art of language, we think mostly of debates. Of course, the art of language is representative of the debate, but can very well be used in everyday life. I then think of a film, The Great Debaters, that traces the way in which language is used to impose itself against others. The film is the true story of Professor Melvin B. Tolson, who formed a debate team at a small university reserved for African Americans in the 30s. Their team won the national championship against the Harvard team. Here, two extracts are interesting to dissect. They both represent the racism undergoes by black people in the United States in the 30s. Those discriminations prevent equality between white people and black people. The first extract shows how the language can be helpful in case of tension. Rather than using violence as whites do, the black family uses the power of language to negotiate. This negotiation is due to the fact that the family crushed a pig belonging to white farmers who wanted to be reimbursed. The language is here a way to escape problems. The second extract is based on a scene of debates between Harvard students and black students forced to attend universities reserved for colored people. The theme of this debate is to whether or not black students can study at the same universities as whites. The black students is very convincing because her speech is full of figures of styles that impress public opinion. Her emotion and anger are felt, but despite all, her knowledge and mastery of language allow her to face the criticism of white people. The most of white people sitting there are very scornful, but the speech of the black lady forces them to listen as it is captivating. To conclude, language is a very powerful tool because apart from its usefulness to the understanding of the other, it is above all essential to assert one's personality and defend oneself in the face of criticism.